Okay, so back to the sermon. And so today on Mother's Day, Jesus is going to take us in his sermon to that realm of biological human life that causes a woman to become a mother. He's going to talk about sex. And what Jesus addresses is a really serious problem that humans have relating to sex. Sex isn't the problem. It's human beings' obsession with it. That's the problem. And so anybody who's read C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity may recall this particular illustration that he used. He has a chapter in there on talking about this whole topic. And in this section, what he does is he asks his readers to imagine a country where people pay to enter a theater and watch a performer bring a covered plate onto the stage. Just before the lights go down, the performer slowly lifts the cover, titillatingly, to reveal a piece of bacon or a pork chop, causing the audience to dribble and smack their lips in excitement. That's how he puts it. He says, if we saw people treating food this way, we would immediately conclude that their appetite for food had gone badly perverted. We wouldn't think the food itself was bad, but that the state of the hunger instinct was abnormal or malfunctioning in some way. And C.S. Lewis argues that the popularity of striptease acts suggests our sexual instinct is in a similar state of disorder. The problem isn't the hunger, which is actually sexual desire, but the fact that it has been inflamed beyond its natural purpose. He clarifies that Christianity does not think sex or food is bad in itself. Rather, it is a spoiled goodness. Just as enjoying a meal is healthy, but living for pitchers of food is not. Enjoying sexual intimacy is healthy, but living for lustful titillations is a corruption of that instinct. And Lewis concludes that the obsession with sexual imagery in culture isn't a sign of liberation, but rather evidence that our collective sexual instinct has gone wrong. And I think he's right on. So, for example, I did a little digging, a little research here. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but how do we know that our society and culture has gone off the rails in terms of sex? Well, it doesn't take a brain scientist, and it doesn't take very long to find out. Prime example, pornography. It is exceptionally prolific on the internet. This amazing technology that has opened up knowledge and information in so many ways for good, of course, has been corrupted by human beings and used in ways other than good for people. There's estimates that suggest that adult content, and I hate that term, adult content, makes up about 4% to 12% of all websites. Its presence in daily web activity is even more pronounced, accounting for roughly 13% of all web searches and rising to 20% of searches on mobile devices. So we're talking about percentages. So percentage is sometimes hard to know exactly what does that play out in actual numbers. So let's take a little look here. So in 2022, this is going back a ways, right? 2022. The total volume of accessible pornographic content was estimated at over 10,000 terabytes. So to put the scale of 10,000 terabytes into perspective, it can hold approximately 2.5 million movies in high definition. Okay, so 2.5 million movies in high definition. So if it's just low quality stuff, which probably a lot of pornography is, that's a lot. It is equivalent to roughly 500 times the amount of data in the entire printed collection of the Library of Congress, often estimated at 20 terabytes. This is 10,000 terabytes. Music, it means it could store roughly 2 billion songs of about 170 million hours of continuous music. Spotify, iTunes, none of those. The number of songs it's always in the millions. This is saying 2 billion songs it could hold. That's a lot. Let's see. Just go through. Okay, so it says leading platforms like Pornhub receives massive traffic, with monthly visits in 2023 exceeding the combined visits to Netflix, Instagram, TikTok, and Pinterest. That's a lot of usage. Approximately 11% of people in the United States watch pornography daily, and about 40 million Americans are regular visitors to adult sites. And it's mostly men. 87% of men view porn at least once a week, compared with 28.5% of women.
Wait, what percent of men?
87.
Every day?
No, of the people that are viewing it.
Consumption is
87%.
notably higher among men. So the ones that are going there, 87% of them are men. It's not the total population. Yeah, that's a good thing to pay. Whoa, yeah, because that. And access is widespread among minors. This is the scary part, with nearly 3/4 of teens aged 13 to 17 reporting they have seen pornographic content online. So I can give a personal example. When I was a young teenager, you didn't have the internet. If you wanted to look and view something like that, it was really hard. You had to find a store, and usually they, I wasn't a Christian then, so that it was all behind the counter or something like that. It was not an accessible thing unless you had a relative or something, and you got a hold of something like that. You couldn't turn your TV on. You didn't have personal computers, nothing. So it was not something that was accessible as just pushing a button. Are you 18? Oh, I can't. Yeah, And then, of course, it's a financial thing about it. The global industry is estimated to be worth between 58 billion and 287 billion. That's quite a range there. And the United States is the largest host of adult websites, containing about 60% of all pornographic domains worldwide. This isn't just stuff being pumped out of Russia or the Middle East or wherever. So that's, kind of validates what C.S. Lewis is saying. And the other proof for what he's saying has to do with the whole sex trafficking industry. It exploits millions of people worldwide, generates billions in illegal profits annually. According to the International Labor Organization, forced commercial sexual exploitation is the most lucrative form of human trafficking, responsible for nearly 3/4 of the industry's total illegal revenue. As of 2024, approximately 49.6 million people live in modern slavery worldwide, with 6.3 million of those in forced commercial sexual exploitation. And women and girls are disproportionately affected, making up about 98% of all sex trafficking victims. And it's just totally linked with pornography, because that's where they're they're being trafficked through that. Children are also highly vulnerable, accounting for more than half of the children in forced labor overall. And again, it's very lucrative. It's the second most profitable criminal activity in the United States. It's extremely profitable because victims are often reused for multiple transactions versus a single drug sale. That's your product's gone. Or arms, that's another one. Sex trafficking is significantly more lucrative per person than other forms of forced labor. Traffickers earn roughly 27 point, boy, how they come up with these precise figures, I don't know, $27,250 per victim in the sex trade each year, compared to about $3,687 for other forced labor categories. So when we were in Thailand and we were sitting on the beach, it's beautiful in the distance, you could see these fishing boats out there, and Phil goes, yeah, those all have slaves on them. Those are all trafficked people that are out there, But that was for fishing purposes. He says, you'll see it here. You'll see, white Western men, escorting around with young Thai girls, and he says, that's part of the thing. Human trafficking is frequently cited as the second most profitable criminal activity in the world, surpassed only by drug trafficking. I think I said that already. Anyway, so that's the world we live. This is the world we live in. This is going on. Human beings, people right now, this moment, are entrapped and enslaved in these things, and it all relates back to exactly what Jesus is talking about. Jesus is not just putting out pretty words. He is talking about the fundamental issues in human life and the problems of human life, and we talked about it last week. From anger leading to murder, violence and murder. And his alternative to that was, we talked about extreme, radical reconciliation as the way we should live our lives and relate to other people. And so this one, that was the radical, or the ruthless elimination of anger last week. This is the ruthless elimination of lust. That's what Jesus is talking about. Here he gets some really graphic examples. So let's take a look at Jesus' response to sexual exploitation. And so he says again, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. Now that's the 7th commandment in the 10 commandments. And that particular command, like murder, is a capital offense. You could get the death penalty for that. You can look that up in Leviticus 20:10 and Deuteronomy 22:22. So the question is, he says, you shall not commit adultery. Well, what is that, right? So you got to take a look. What is that? Well, the strict Old Testament legal definition of adultery is this: sexual relations between a married or engaged woman and a man other than their husband or fiance. That's the strict definition of adultery. Don't do that, you're good, right? Don't do that, you're living righteous according to the law. So Jesus is saying, that's what you've heard. And the Pharisees had taken this and run with it. So when you come to John chapter 8, when you have the woman caught in adultery, is there a man involved in that? She wasn't having adultery by herself. She was having adultery with a man, right? Is that man being brought before Jesus? No, it was the woman. So they had worked these loopholes around and everything so the guys could get off. And it's so interesting because that's the specific sin that's in question when Jesus says, he who is out without sin cast the first stone, and they all start leaving. So what is that telling you? They're not leaving because they've had bad thoughts. They're leaving because they'd all committed adultery. But they had worked these loopholes around, like, oh, well, you could go to a prostitute. They're not married, so, that's okay, right? Things like that. And remember, that society was a patriarchal society that women were viewed as property. A wife was a husband's possession, his property, which plays into this because that's why many of the commentators would say this was a capital offense, because a wife was viewed as under her husband's protection or possession, and the act was considered a crime against the husband's, or his finances were involved because they were exclusive to this woman. And so that's why they looked at it as this capital crime, because it was a sin against a husband's authority, his possession over the woman. Not because of the woman, but because of the guy, what it did to him. So this very strict view of righteousness said that as long as you didn't commit the actual physical act of intercourse with another man's wife or fiancé, because betrothal was considered equivalent to marriage, you were a good person. You were a righteous person in the eyes of God. So what went on in your mind, what went on in your thoughts, your desires, so on, didn't matter. That didn't really have anything to do with it. It was whether or not you actually did the physical act. So you could indulge all you want in fantasizing about someone's wife, going to bed with her, using her for your own pleasure. You could do that all you want, and you could still be a good person in their interpretation of righteousness. So as long as you didn't cross the line and have sex with that person, you were okay. And Jesus is saying that kind of view of righteousness is incapable of getting someone into the kingdom of heaven. It's totally incompatible with the view of the kingdom of heaven that Jesus is talking about. So Jesus comes, as he does throughout the sermon, at least through this chapter 5, he says, "But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart." Now, with this statement, Jesus is making it explicitly clear what he's talking about. In the topic of anger, it wasn't quite as obvious that he was saying, you need a heart transformation. It's a matter of the heart. But here it's explicit. He says it. If you look at a woman to lust after her, you've committed adultery with her in your heart. Now remember, the heart that's your desires. It also includes your thoughts, your minds, all of those things, your will. It's all wrapped up in that. It's the inner you. And so he is making it very clear that he is not talking about a righteousness that is just having to do with what is it? The externals, a righteousness that's only concerned with following the rules outwardly. He is zeroing in on what is the problem. This is the problem with human beings. It's their heart. It's our heart. It's who we are at the deepest levels of our being. That's where the problem is. You don't deal with that, don't expect to have really good results otherwise. He's saying the human heart has to be transformed. It has to be changed into a heart that is capable, as he said earlier, of doing good deeds for the right reasons. What? Do your good deeds before men. Why? So that they may see your good deeds and not glorify you, not talk about you, not give you a plaque, so that they may honor and glorify your Father who is in heaven. That's the kind of heart that Jesus says you gotta have that kind of heart to be in the kingdom of heaven. You gotta have the heart that says, not my will, but your will be done. May your kingdom come. May your will be done on heaven. Above all else, that's your primary motivation for life, purpose for life, is to honor and glorify God and to live in such a way that other people see that and glorify God. That's what he is talking about here. Because Jesus is not about just not repairing, but making the old creation look a little nicer, putting on a new coat of paint or something like that. No, he's talking about new creation, recreation. He makes us into new creatures. That's what he's all about. Not people who are out to try to impress God with how good a person they are, or to try to impress other people so that other people will think good about them. No, it goes way below the surface to our deepest thoughts and our intentions. And this is picked up throughout the rest of the New Testament, the writings of Paul and the others. So in Hebrews, we get this passage we all know. For the word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, piercing to the division of soul and spirit, of both joints and marrow, and able to judge the thoughts and intentions of the heart. That's where we live. That's where Jesus is going to in this sermon, to the joints and marrows, thoughts and intentions of the heart. That's where the transformation, that's where it has to work. That's where it has to be taking place. And the world is totally confused by a message like that. Totally confused. They were threatened by it in Jesus' day, and they are threatened by it in our day. So that's why when I consider one of our most genuine Christian presidents, Jimmy Carter, was mercilessly attacked, almost lost him his bid for the presidency, when in an interview, he, in talking about his faith, actually referring to this passage, said, and this took place in 1976, 50 years ago, he said that he was guilty of committing adultery in his heart. Oh man, that was an uproar. That was the Jimmy Carter gate, about as much as he got in that day. So, I mean, and the thing is, he is just saying what was true about every other man, probably, in the world. But they just attacked him for that. So, can you imagine someone who's run for president today saying something like that being a shocking thing at all? Can you imagine? I mean, but this threatened his candidacy. And at the time, he was running against Gerald Ford, and he had a substantial lead over Gerald Ford in the polls at that time. And this nearly derailed his campaign because it was seen as being overly candid and just kind of weird by many voters. Things have changed. I mean, I don't want to, get too into the politics, but just think about it. We got a president he was sued for sexual assault and found liable, guilty. The judge said this is the equivalent of rape, what he committed. This is, and it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, and he's actually bragged about what he can do with women because he's famous, and you're all familiar with that. So we've come a long way, we haven't come a long way. We've fallen a lot further down the hole in 50 years. And you see it, and it's not just in the politics, you see it everywhere. I mean, it's like, it's become normal, almost considered normal. Why you get so uptight about this stuff? People, we don't want to repress our desires and things like that. And there's a lot you could go into where that whole source comes from. But we see it played out in every form of media, and it's just become not a big deal anymore, right? So that's what Jesus says. He's saying that you committed a capital crime by just looking at a woman to lust after her. And that's an important thing, just a very important distinction to make, because a lot of Christian friends, guys I know and things like that, they think by just having the thought they've sinned. So, man, they don't go to the coast, they don't go to the beach, because it's like, why would I do that? Why would I put myself there? It's like an alcoholic. Why would I go into a liquor store? And that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying you are looking at a woman with the intention that if the opportunity arose, that you would take advantage of it and you would cross over that line and you would commit adultery. That's what Jesus is talking about. This is, it's one thing to be tempted. We're all tempted. Temptation is not sin. And that's the devil's big lie, is to get us to feel guilty because we've been tempted. That's just the same. You're human. You're going to be tempted. And it's so important that we make that distinction, because we can resist temptation. We're told to resist temptation. Lead us not into temptation. We're to pray every time we pray the Lord's Prayer. And so if the devil can convince us that simply having the thoughts and being tempted is sin, man, we're going to be laden with guilt. We're going to be feeling like we're incapable of getting above that, getting out of that there's no way out of it. And that's not what Jesus is saying. That is so important. And I can speak from personal experience that was so freeing when I realized that. And so I made up little songs like blackbirds, blackbirds, you can try to land on my head, but I'm going to shake you out. Fly away, because if you can let a bird land on your head, but if you let him build a nest, well, that's on you, So, it's that taking every thought captive kind of a thing. So Jesus makes this statement that is so extreme. So here he's saying, and I say this is the logical outcome of following the Pharisees' righteousness. This is one aspect of it. Self-mutilation. He says, if your right eye makes you stumble, tear it out and throw it from you. Can you imagine actually doing that? For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. So if your right hand makes you stumble, cut it off and throw it from you. For it is better for you to lose one of the parts of your body than for your whole body to go into hell. He's doing a logical thing. He's saying, hell's terrible. Hell's forever, right? Hell is eternal separation from God. So for this brief time of our life, sure, hey, better to go out without an eye or go without a hand if those are causing you to sin and is going to wind you up in hell. So is Jesus really advocating self-mutilation as a remedy for adultery or for having improper sexual thoughts? Is that what Jesus is saying? Well, throughout church history, people have taken this literally. I mean, vows of chastity that's one step removed from this, but then there's also people who have poked their eyes out with thinking, well, if I can't see a woman, then I won't lust after her. If I mutilate myself, and most commentators think here, just a little graphic, but we're all adults, that was a euphemism for their penis. So talk about castration. And you know what? People who've tried that found out to their own horror, it doesn't work. It does not work. A blind, one-armed, or even castrated man is still quite capable of committing adultery in his heart. So what is Jesus saying here? What is Jesus saying? Well, there's really two views. There's two views you can take on this. First, Jesus is using a very extreme illustration, and he often does that, the plank in the eye kind of a thing. We talked about it last week, dropping your sacrifice at the temple and traveling 3-4 days to go make it right with somebody and then coming back. Extreme things to make a point. So he's talking about how we are to ruthlessly deal with improper sexual thoughts. It's a really serious thing. That's why Paul said, take every thought captive or take it prisoner. It's why I call this message the ruthless elimination of lust. Jesus is telling us that it's really serious, deadly stuff we're talking about here. We can't treat it lightly or half-heartedly. We have to be ruthless in dealing with it. It's so crucial that Jesus is saying that to lose an eye or an arm is worth it to avoid ending up in hell. He's not advocating that you actually do this. He's just saying you need to be really ruthlessly dealing with this, fighting this. And I agree with that view 100%. That it is. It's not something you can casually deal with. You're going to be on the losing end. But there's a second view that thinks that Jesus was using a kind of logic known as reductio ad absurdum, which is Latin for taking a viewpoint to its logical, though absurd, conclusion. And here, this view said Jesus is pointing out what one should do if the righteousness of the Pharisees is to be strictly followed. So if looking at a woman with lust can lead eventually to adultery, you don't want to wind up committing adultery, well, take precautions. Pull your eye out. Castrate yourself. Cut off the offending body part that causes you to stumble and commit adultery. So that's one view about this verse. Eliminate the source of the problem. If it's your eyes, get rid of it. that's the most logical thing to do when you're looking at the possibility of spending an eternity separated from God. That's the absurd logic that he says is where you would go if you truly want to follow the Pharisees' form of righteousness. So if Jesus was literally saying to mutilate yourself, the church today would be filled with a lot of one-eyed eunuchs. That's not what he was advocating for, obviously. He was pointing out the shallowness and the ineffectiveness of the Pharisees' system of righteousness if taken to its logical conclusions. So which of these views is the right view? Well, I think Jesus is smart enough to say something that is true on both levels. Of course, we're to take it seriously and to deal with it very seriously. We have to ruthlessly work toward eliminating lust as a dominating force in our lives. And at the same time, he's also saying how you go about it is not the way that the Pharisees' approach was. You don't do that. That's not going to work. And so as Jesus progresses through the sermon, it's going to become clearer and clearer that he's talking about this spiritual heart transplant. So you were right, Deb, when you said, oh, you need to cut your heart out. But he's talking about a spiritual heart, which is what the Old Testament promised. You know, Jeremiah said, I'm going to take out your heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. It's a heart transplant. That's what Jesus is talking about. He is saying we have to be changed from the inside out into people whose primary motivation and purpose for living is to love God with all our hearts and to love others, our neighbors, as we love ourselves. And if we approach life viewing God as someone or something that exists to serve me primarily, to meet my desires and my will, we are not living in the kingdom of heaven. In the kingdom of heaven, that's where everybody is living to please God, to serve God, not ourselves. That mindset is incompatible with the way of Jesus. So if I live thinking that others exist to please me and serve me, and I can use them, and I should use them however I can to serve my will, Jesus is saying, sorry, that's not the way it works in the kingdom of heaven. And it won't get you into the kingdom of heaven, keep you out of it. It is incompatible with the way of Jesus. Jesus is saying in the sermon, and he's really pointedly in this particular passage about sexual desire, that we have to go to the source and get it right. We have to get it right at the source. If we operate from a false understanding of reality, then nothing but pain and heartache will follow. If we operate from a right view of reality, according to reality as Jesus explains it to us, we are told that joy and perfect peace and love, eternal, abundant life, is our possession. It will come to us. But we have to get it right at the source, the heart. Otherwise, all we're doing is you're putting lipstick on a pig, or you're putting whipped cream on a trash can, and underneath it's all stinks still. So I'm going to close it off here now with some words from Dallas Willard. I really recommend anybody who hears this If this is something you struggle with, this is a really helpful section. Get the copy of this book, go online, look it up, The Divine Conspiracy, and read pages 158 to 168, a little section called The Destruction of Fantasized Desire. And here's how he closes that section. Here, let me read it. He says, if you dismember your body to the point where you could serve, if you dismember your body to the point where you could never murder or even look hatefully at another, never commit adultery or even look to lust, your heart could still be full of anger, contempt, and obsessive desire for what is wrong, no matter how thoroughly stifled or suppressed it may be. He quotes Jesus, from within, out of the heart of men, the thoughts of evil proceed, fornication, thefts, murder, adulteries, acts of greed and iniquity, as well as deceit, lewdness, the envious glare, blasphemy, arrogance, and foolishness. All of these evils come from inside and pollute the source. The well is poisoned, and it's got to be changed. The goodness of the kingdom heart, by contrast, is the positive love of God and of those around us that fills it and crowds out the many forms of evil. From that goodness comes deeds of respect and purity that characterize a sexuality as it was meant by God to be. Amen.